On this episode of the podcast, I interviewed the Executive Director of the Department of Public Safety here at Bryant University, Stephen Bannon. We talked about the evolution of COVID-19 and the effects it had on campus safety, what the fall semester will look like from a crowd control perspective, the nuances each residential building has on campus, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I welcome on to the podcast former major of the Rhode Island State Police Department and an executive director of the Department of Public Safety here at Bryant University. He's been at that position since 2012. Stephen Bannon, I thank you for joining the program.
Hi, Cole. Good morning. My pleasure.
So my first question is, a lot has gone on since the campus has been locked down due to COVID-19. We first heard rumblings coming out of China and the effect that this disease or virus had, I should say. When did you see it as an imminent threat to Bryant's safety?
Well, it was progressing. I think it was around the holidays that, you learned of it. And then as time moved on through January, again, it was pretty much isolated to China. Mm-hmm. But then some cases started to develop in the U.S. I can't remember the exact date, but as far as an imminent threat to Bryant, it was as we moved through February, towards late February, and being aware of spring break coming up within a couple of weeks, and the thought of all of our students fanning out, mm-hmm. Not just domestically into other countries, and then the idea of then turning around and coming back to campus. It was at that point, I'd say late February, I recognized this could be a serious threat to our campus.
Yeah, and I think going into that, how has your day-to-day operations changed since students were no longer allowed back on campus?
Well, lots changed. Day-to-day, I mean, there's really no activity, hadn't been through the spring on campus, but my life changed with Zoom, and more Zoom. I mean, just some days just constantly sitting where I am right now through meetings and planning. Mm-hmm. But I did take some measures, as you might know, everybody pretty much 99% of the faculty and staff was working remotely. I had to keep people here because we had students here, but we really thinned out the number of people working. We shortened the shifts so we wouldn't have, the way they're currently aligned, we have overlaps of first, second, third shift. We made them 8-hour shifts so we had less interaction among our staff, and a number of other things that clearly are different than the way we normally would operate.
Yeah, I mean, those present a lot of challenges here. And then in the most recent email there by the new president, he cited that he's made a lot of committees into ensuring Bryant's safety there. Were you on any of these committees on getting us back in the fall or anything of the sort? I
was internally on two, the Health and Safety Committee, which started planning for how we're going to accept students and staff back en masse for the fall, which included plan for testing, mm-hmm. Doing daily attestation for symptoms, locating spaces for if we're going to do testing, planning for, the inevitable people that ultimately test positive, and what we're going to do with them, and then contact tracing and those that were exposed to them and how we self-quarantine, cleaning. That was that kind of the focus of that whole committee. And I was on a student life committee as well, that we looked at how the whole movement's going to, first of all, when people would come back, how the movement is going to take place, occupancy of certain areas. Well, one thing that we're working on is it's going to be some COVID rules this fall. Mm-hmm. The idea of the social gatherings, which I'm sure you've seen in the past, and occupancy limits, guests overnight, those types of things, planning for what we're going to do, in this new world. So those are a number of internal committees. I was also involved in a residence life committee with all the other schools in Rhode Island. And I currently serve, I'm the president of a group called RICUPSA, mm-hmm. which is all the campus public safety directors in Rhode Island. So have organized a number of meetings with my counterparts at the other schools on what they're doing to plan. So again, a lot of Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, that's a lot of sitting in one place. Stationary is obviously not the norm for you. Getting into that a little bit more here, as we plan to come back in the fall, what is your greatest concern as it relates to student and campus safety?
Well, I think it's the obvious, and what every school in this country is concerned about is you put a bunch of young adults back together. They haven't seen one another. This has been, something like in our lifetimes we have never seen, and I think we're seeing it now too with the states. Just in the last week, the cases now that are popping up. States started to loosen their restrictions. People began to travel, congregate in bars and what have you, beaches, and now cases are spiking. And that, I think, is clearly our concern. I feel bad. This is college time. You guys should be a good time for you all. Everybody's going to come back together and spending close time together and without masks and without social distancing. The clear concern is cases arising, and then what will that look like, and what will happen if or when it does.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, what do you think is the biggest factor of success, or something that Bryant has that not a lot of other universities have that could attribute to a successful fall reopening plan?
Well, I mean, again, I think the success will depend on how everybody obeys the rules. What makes us a little unique is that and I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. We're almost 90% residential student living, but we can restrict and screen people that do come onto our campus. And we've been doing that now here actually since the start of it. Now we're screening everybody literally at entry control. So a little bit unique again because of our location and the way we can control, people coming on the campus, but we're still going to face certainly a lot of challenges.
From a professor's standpoint, or I guess any outside worker at Bryant University, when they come on campus, what will the process of them getting on campus be like?
So we've already gone to this. It's on the Bryant mobile app, and I'm not sure if you'll have video with this, but everybody that comes onto campus every day will have to fill out this attestation, which asks you the simple questions of the symptoms of COVID-19, or if you've traveled to internationally or to another state where there may be a stay-at-home order. And you'll be required to, once you fill it out, it'll give you, I don't think you can see it on the screen here, but a green check mark to say that you're cleared to come to campus. Everybody coming through, and we're even making our contractors and vendors do the same thing, has to show that green check mark at entry control. And if you have a symptom, you get a red X. And the way it's set up is that if you're a student, that will be sent to health services, where the health services staff will follow up with you. And if you're a faculty or staff member, we'll go to human resources, and they will follow up with you and give you steps that you need to take, to go to your own doctor or what have you. But certainly you have to stay off of campus until you're cleared to do so.
So getting into a little bit more residential life here in Bryant University, each hall has its nuances. So you look at the freshman halls, you look at upper, lower village, or even the townhouses. There's basically three variants on living situations at Bryant University. And you mentioned prior in this interview, 90% of the students live on campus. And so I assume that's quite the difficult challenge of when you propose a reopening plan of making sure it curtails to each one of these living environments. Have you taken any steps in the freshman hall might have a different situation of rules compared to like a townhouse or so, or how does that go?
Well, with respect to the freshman halls, specifically Bristol and Warren, those two halls present the greatest challenge because of the community bathrooms. The ratio is, I think, somewhere in the area of 39-1 for certain bathrooms. That Residence Life is working on a plan to limit the number of students and when they use those bathrooms. And also, as you can imagine, there's a cleaning plan for not just the residence halls, but the academic halls and athletic facilities. But there's going to be a lot more resources dedicated to those high occupancy bathrooms to be cleaned multiple times daily. So there's a difference with those two halls versus the Suite Village and townhouses. But all of the bathrooms will be cleaned daily, and some multiple times daily. again, as you mentioned, they're all very unique. And yes, there is a plan, as I mentioned before, these COVID rules we're coming up with, which will dictate the number of maximum persons that can be in each one of those double rooms, the suite village, and townhouses. And that's going to have to be strictly enforced. And it's not solely going to fall on the shoulders of public safety. Residents' life is going to be involved, and we'll also need help from other staff on campus.
And going into that, what happens if there is an outbreak or someone does have COVID in a dorm room or a residential place on campus?
Yeah, it's funny you use the word outbreak. We just learned recently, last few weeks, the Rhode Island Department of Health would consider an outbreak of two cases as a, quote, outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
But when that happens, we have a plan. We're taking one residence hall offline for the purpose of isolating positive cases, and also for a period anyway of using it for self-quarantine for those that were exposed. But as those numbers start to rise, that space may not be adequate for both of those categories. We may end up having, for self-quarantine, contracting with a local hotel to have students go there, or if they choose even to go home. Many of our students live within driving distance. But there's going to be a point in time, well, let's hope not, and knock on wood, but if there may be a point in time where the cases rise to a certain level, that we're under the guise of the Rhode Island Department of Health, where they may just say, listen, Bryant, you've got X number of cases. It's a situation that can't continue in person, on campus, in-person learning, and you'll need to shut down. So that may happen. And by shut down, we'll probably end up having to phase back to what happened back around March 15th or so.
Yeah, and as it specifically pertains to Simonson Dining Hall there, what would the eating situation be like there? Because obviously, if you live in a townhouse, you don't necessarily need a meal plan, but for every other student living on campus that's not in a townhouse, then you would need to go there.
Yeah, I hadn't been involved in the dining plan. That was a separate committee, but I do know they have, as we speak now, the number of tables has been completely thinned out within Simonson to accommodate social distancing. You've seen that dining hall at lunchtime and dinners. It's not going to look anything. It can't look anything like it has in the past. So there will be other options to feed students other than sitting down in there. There'll be grab and go options. I don't believe they're going to be entirely at Simonson. They may be at other locations where you can kind of grab your meal and go. For those that do use Simonson, there's going to be different foot traffic plans, one way in and a separate exit for people once they're done. So yeah, it's the whole thing's going to look entirely different than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, continuing on the crowd control here, other large places of congregation of students, so you got like the Fisher Student Center, the library, are there going to be certain student limits in there, or how is that going to be monitored?
I don't know. Like, for example, the Fisher Center, I know you've seen in the past the way the furniture is laid out, where people can sit in groups and study or just relax. The furniture, much of the furniture is going to be removed, so there won't be areas where large numbers of people can sit and either study or work or relax. As far as the bigger rooms, like if there are meetings like Pepito, I think that initially the plan is for as much as we can manage to continue to do the meetings virtually. And we're just going to have to monitor how things are going. Right now, Rhode Island is in a decline where the governor's, we're in phase 2 with the hopes of moving to a phase 3 option where you can gather in larger groups. I don't think it will be up to 50 at that point, but the hope is things will continue to trend in a positive direction. But with what's happening in other areas, and again, my fear is when we bring everybody back, this trend may turn around. So we just have to be nimble with what's going on at the time.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of nimble, let's say Bryant does have to shut down and send everyone home. Will there be anything different than what happened last semester, or will the departure process be relatively the same?
Well, I think we learned a bit from the last time. Nobody knew what, the seriousness of this whole epidemic at the beginning. One of the things we did do right after spring break is that obviously people went away with the expectation of coming back as, normally they would, but now they're going to have to learn remotely. And they had items in their rooms that they needed to continue their studies. So we had a pretty steady stream of people coming back and grabbing, small items.
Mm-hmm.
I think if this does happen again, we may try and encourage people, because I think if we shut down at some point in whenever it may be, obviously the chances of coming back by the end of the semester are not, very, very remote. So if you're going to come back and get a few things, you might as well come back and get all of your things. So because we didn't do it that way, people had to come back multiple times to retrieve their belongings. So we may do that differently. And again, those are the people that are within driving distance. We have to do, make certain accommodations for people that are outside of driving distance. But that's one lesson learned from the spring.
Yeah, and looking at other universities, and specifically in Rhode Island, there's a lot of universities that have particular size that correlates with Bryant. So you got like Roger Williams as one of them comes to mind pretty quickly here. You got Salve. Do you look at any of those other small universities in Rhode Island as being comparable to Bryant and what you could implement on campus?
Well, you mentioned Roger Williams. One advantage they have over everybody, maybe not Johnson Wales. Roger Williams purchased a hotel. I want to say like 10 years ago, and they use it as a satellite campus. It's in the town of Portsmouth. As I mentioned before, with our, the challenges of isolation and self-quarantine, I wish we owned a hotel, because it's an ideal setup for the, what we're going to need to deal with. So they have a great advantage over the rest of us with that, that piece of real estate. But yeah, Salve has, they've got challenges, I think, bigger than ours. The housing situation, everybody's got their own challenges.
So the final question for this interview here, we're changing gears here. Being a former major at the Rhode Island State of Police, have you ever had to manage a situation current to now where there was such a lack of distrust between citizens and law enforcement?
Never to this level. It's really unfortunate. And, I feel bad. The police in this country are being vilified. I have to think, and I'm confident that the majority of Americans support and respect their police. What we've seen happen in these situations, especially in Minneapolis, I watched that video for 5 seconds and said, what is this guy doing? It was so egregious. And people need to know that 99.9% of the police don't operate that way, and they respect everybody, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation. But what is going on now, I have to say, is done by an extreme minority, and it's sad to see that some of it's being, what's going on in Seattle and even now in Atlanta overnight, with people taking over areas of their cities. But I think the closest thing that I can reflect on, and I wasn't directly involved in, back in 2003, there was a situation here in Rhode Island where the Narragansett Indian tribe decided to defy state law in Rhode Island, began selling cigarettes without taxes, and they were given a number of directions by the governor at the time to stop, and they refused to do so. And the state police were then kind of put in a position to stop it. And we conducted a search warrant at this location, and it was almost like a setup. They knew we were coming, and it resulted in a violent struggle between police officers and members of the tribe, all which was captured on video. It was tough to watch, but reflecting back, a lot of people said, why did the state police do what they did? And I think all of us, with hindsight, probably would have done it differently. But there was a lot of public sentiment against the state police for the way that smoke shop raid went.
Do you think this will have any effect on Bryant's DPS officers or the public safety on campus? Any of this mistrust between officers and the public?
I really don't know. I know there's a group of students and alumni that are organizing some town hall meetings with Bryant administrators to talk about issues that have occurred on campus and things that they hope to change. But the reality is my staff, we don't have arrest powers. We just basically try and do our best to enforce student conduct rules on campus. But when it comes to violations of the law, the Smithfield Police get involved. But so we're not, we really don't use force generally, and only unless extreme circumstances arise. So I don't know that we really haven't had any in my time here any issues or accusations of racial bias by public safety officers towards members of the Bryant community.
So ending on a happier or more positive note here, minus the less Zoom calls, hopefully in the fall, what is one thing you're looking forward to come late August here when students return back on campus?
You just nailed it. We miss the students. We miss you guys. It's just I know it's been depressing for everybody, but I mean, that's what the vibe and the energy that's brought to this campus by our students is just what makes this place special. And it just hasn't, we've just been without that. It's just been such a gloomy period in our lifetime in this world, and on a smaller level here on this campus. It's not the same without all of you guys here. And that's what we're really looking forward to, seeing your smiling faces and enjoying yourselves. And unfortunately, I say seeing your smiling faces, but it'd be difficult to do because you're all going to be wearing masks. But just having you back is really what we're all looking forward to. And hopefully we can do it safely. And hopefully we can have a full semester the way we want to have.
I thank you, Steve Bannon, for joining me here in this interview. It's been a real pleasure.
Same here, Cole. Thank you and good luck. Take care.
All right.